The smell of turkey and disappointment filled our family's dining room as I sat at the far end of the table, relegated to what my siblings had dubbed the failure seat. It was Christmas Day 2024, and like every year for the past 5 years, I was being reminded of exactly where I stood in the Torres family hierarchy. "Isabella, could you pass the wine?" my brother Miguel asked, deliberately looking past me to address our cousin instead. The message was clear. Even at Christmas dinner I was invisible. My father, Roberto Torres, cleared his throat with the authority of a man who'd built a successful construction company from nothing. At 62 he still commanded respect from everyone in our extended family. Everyone except me, apparently. "Before we say grace," Dad began, his voice carrying that familiar tone of disappointment, "I think we need to address the elephant in the room." I knew what was coming. My stomach tightened as 23 pairs of eyes turned toward me. The entire extended Torres clan was here. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even family friends who'd known me since childhood. All successful, all married with beautiful families, all living up to the Torres name. And then there was me. 29-year-old Isabella Torres, the family disappointment. "You're the family disappointment," Dad announced, his words cutting through the warm Christmas atmosphere like a knife. "Look at you, Isabella. 29 years old, no husband, no children, living in that tiny apartment, working some mysterious job that you can't even explain to your own family." My mother, Carmen, nodded sadly. "Mija, we just don't understand. Your brother Miguel has his law practice. Your sister Sofia has her medical clinic. Even your young cousins are starting families and building careers. But you..." "She's a failure," my Aunt Linda chimed in, shaking her head. "I hate to say it about family, but it's true. What exactly do you even do for work, Isabella? You're always so secretive." I'd heard this speech before, but never in front of the entire extended family. Never on Christmas. Never with such finality in my father's voice. "We had such high hopes for you," Dad continued. "You were the smartest one in school, got that scholarship to MIT for computer science. We thought you'd become something great, maybe work for one of those big tech companies like your cousin Marco suggested. Instead, you dropped out senior year for some startup nonsense that never went anywhere." The truth was more complicated than that. Yes, I'd left MIT 3 months before graduation. But not because I was failing, because I'd received an offer that would change everything. An offer to join a small team of developers working on something that would eventually become the backbone of modern cryptocurrency trading platforms. "She probably works at some coffee shop," my sister Sophia whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's why she can never explain what she does. She's embarrassed." "I heard she drives for one of those rideshare apps," added my cousin Elena. "No steady income, no benefits, no future. It's sad, really." My teenage nephew David, Miguel's 15-year-old son, looked up from his phone. "Aunt Isabella doesn't even have a car, does she? I've never seen her drive anything." That was true. I took public transportation everywhere, walked when I could, occasionally used rideshares. To my family, this was further evidence of my failure. They had no idea that I preferred not to draw attention to myself, that I'd learned early on in my career that looking successful often meant people asked uncomfortable questions. "The worst part," Dad said, his voice rising with frustration, "is that you won't even accept help. Miguel offered to get you a position at his law firm as a secretary. Sophia said you could work reception at her clinic. I could use someone in the office at Torres Construction. But no, you're too proud for honest work." Everyone agreed I was a failure. The nods around the table were universal. Even the family friends were shaking their heads in sympathy for my poor parents, burdened with such a disappointing daughter. "Roberto, maybe we should just enjoy Christmas dinner," my mother suggested weakly. "No, Carmen. This needs to be said. Isabella, you're 29 years old. It's time to grow up, accept reality, and stop chasing these childish dreams. Whatever this mysterious job of yours is, it's clearly not working. Look at you, you're wearing the same dress you wore to Sophia's wedding 3 years ago. You don't own a car, you live in a studio apartment in the worst part of town." I looked down at my navy blue dress. It was indeed the same one from Sophia's wedding, though not because I couldn't afford new clothes. I'd actually purchased it from a boutique in Paris during a business trip, but I'd never mentioned that to my family. They wouldn't have believed me anyway. "Dad, I appreciate your concern," I began, but he cut me off. "Concern? Isabella, this isn't concern anymore. This is an intervention. We're all here because we love you, but we can't watch you waste your life anymore. Sophia is considering hiring you as a receptionist out of pity. Miguel thinks you might be eligible for some kind of job training program through the state. I'm willing to give you one more chance at Torres Construction, but you'll start at the bottom. Filing, answering phones, maybe eventually working your way up to administrative assistant. The condescension was overwhelming. Here was my family, offering me entry-level positions out of charity, treating me like someone who needed to be rescued from her own poor decisions. What we're trying to say, Mija, my mother added gently, is that it's okay to admit you made mistakes. You can come home, live with us for a while, save some money and start over. There's no shame in admitting that this independence experiment didn't work out. Just then, the bank manager knocked on our door. The sound was sharp, authoritative, the kind of knock that meant business. Dad frowned and glanced at Mom. Are you expecting someone? Not on Christmas Day, Mom replied, looking confused. The knocking continued, persistent and professional. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could see the silhouette of a man in a dark suit. I'll get it, Dad muttered, clearly annoyed at the interruption to his intervention. The entire family watched as he walked to the front door and opened it. Standing on our doorstep was James Patterson, the regional manager of First National Bank. I recognized him immediately, though my family had never met him. He was impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase, and wearing the kind of expression that meant he was here on serious business. Mr. Torres? He asked politely. I'm James Patterson from First National Bank. I apologize for disturbing your Christmas celebration, but I need to speak with someone in your family immediately. It's regarding a significant financial matter that requires urgent attention. Dad's face went pale. The construction business had been struggling lately, and I knew he'd been worried about loans and cash flow. The last thing any business owner wants is an unexpected visit from their bank manager, especially on Christmas Day. Is there a problem with our accounts? Dad asked nervously. I thought everything was current. If there's an issue with the business loan. No, sir, Mr. Patterson interrupted, looking past Dad into the dining room where our entire family sat frozen. I'm not here about Torres Construction. I'm here about a private matter that requires immediate discussion. He stepped into the foyer and his eyes scanned the room until they found me. Ms. Torres, we need to discuss your $127 million investment. The room went silent when they heard those words. Every conversation stopped. Every fork was set down. Every person in that dining room turned to stare at me with expressions ranging from confusion to shock to complete disbelief. I'm sorry, Dad stammered. Did you say $127 million? Mr. Patterson looked surprised by the family's reaction. Sir. Ms. Isabella Torres has been one of our most significant private banking clients for the past 3 years. Her portfolio has grown substantially, and with the recent cryptocurrency surge and her real estate acquisitions, we need to discuss some immediate decisions regarding her investments. My mother's mouth fell open. Sophia dropped her wine glass and it shattered on the hardwood floor. Miguel looked like he'd been slapped. There must be some mistake, my Aunt Linda said weakly. Isabella doesn't have any money. She can barely afford. Ma'am, Mr. Patterson interrupted politely, I assure you there's no mistake. Miss Torres, I apologize for interrupting your family celebration, but the Nakamura Group's offer on your downtown properties expires at midnight tonight, and the cryptocurrency markets are moving rapidly. We need your decisions on several time-sensitive matters. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with documents. Your Bitcoin holdings alone have increased by $23 million since Friday's close, and the Singapore development project requires your approval by end of business tomorrow. The silence in the room was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop as my family tried to process what they were hearing. Isabella, Dad whispered, his voice completely different now, uncertain, almost fearful. What is he talking about? I looked around the table at my family, these people who had just spent 20 minutes explaining to me why I was a failure, why I needed their help, why I should accept their charity positions and move back home with my parents. Well, I said calmly, standing up from the failure seat, I suppose this is as good a time as any to explain what I actually do for work. Mr. Patterson handed me the folder. Ms. Torres, the real estate portfolio summary is on page 3. The Nakamura Group is offering $89 million for the downtown block. which is $15 million above your initial asking price. However, given the development projections, you might want to consider holding for another 6 months. I flipped through the documents, aware that every eye in the room was watching my every movement. What's the timeline on the Singapore project? They need confirmation by Tuesday, but given the scope, it's a $340 million development deal. I wanted to ensure you had adequate time to review. My nephew David's phone had slipped from his hands onto his plate. My cousin Marco, the one who thought I should work for a big tech company, was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Isabella," my mother whispered, "what is happening? Who are you?" I looked at Mr. Patterson. "Can we discuss this Tuesday morning? I'd like to enjoy Christmas dinner with my family." "Of course," he said professionally. "I'll have my assistant schedule a 10 a.m. meeting to review everything. And congratulations on the Forbes feature, by the way. The article about young cryptocurrency innovators was very well written." Forbes. The family that had just called me a failure was learning that I'd been featured in Forbes magazine. After Mr. Patterson left, the silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Dad found his voice. "Isabella," he said carefully, "how much money do you have?" I sat back down at the table, but somehow the failure seat didn't feel the same anymore. "The $127 million he mentioned is just one portion of my portfolio. It's complicated, Dad. I have investments in cryptocurrency, real estate, several tech startups, and a development company." "How?" Sophia asked, her voice barely a whisper. "How is this possible? Remember when I left MIT? I didn't drop out because I was failing. I left because I was recruited by a team developing early cryptocurrency trading algorithms. We built something that became the foundation for several major trading platforms. When Bitcoin started gaining traction, I was positioned to benefit significantly." Miguel, my successful lawyer brother, looked stunned. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Tell you what? That I was successful? Would you have believed me? An hour ago, you were offering me a secretary job out of pity." The shame on his face was evident. "Isabella, I had no idea." "None of you did. And you know why? Because you never asked. You saw that I took public transportation and assumed I was poor. You saw that I wore the same dress twice and assumed I couldn't afford new clothes. You saw that I lived simply and assumed I was a failure." "But why?" Mom asked, tears in her eyes. "Why didn't you just tell us the truth?" "Because I learned early on that wealth changes how people treat you. I wanted relationships with my family based on who I am, not what I have. I wanted to be loved for myself, not my bank account." Dad looked down at his hands. "And instead we made you feel like a failure." "For 5 years," I said quietly. "Every family gathering, every holiday, every phone call. I was the disappointment, the one who couldn't get her life together." "The apartment," Elena said suddenly. "You said you live in a studio apartment in the worst part of town." "I do. I also own the entire building. And the 3 buildings next to it. That's what Mr. Patterson meant about downtown properties." The revelations kept hitting them in waves. Everything they thought they knew about me was wrong. "So when I offered you a job," Sophia began, "as a receptionist." "Yes. Remember. While I was sitting in that very chair, I owned more real estate than Torres Construction has ever developed." The weight of their words, their assumptions, their intervention, was settling on everyone at the table. The family that had gathered to save me from my failures was realizing that I had never needed saving at all. "Isabella," Dad said, his voice heavy with regret, "can you forgive us?" I looked around the table at my family, still my family despite everything. They had hurt me, yes, but they had done it out of love, out of concern, even if it was misguided. "There's nothing to forgive," I said. "But there are things that need to change. I won't be treated like a failure anymore. I won't be dismissed or ignored or talked down to. I'm successful, I'm happy, and I'm proud of what I've built." "We are too," Mom said quickly. "We're so proud, Mija. We didn't know." "How you do." As I looked around the table at my family's shocked faces, I realized that Christmas dinner had taken an unexpected turn. The turkey was getting cold, Sophia's broken wine glass still lay on the floor, and everyone was looking at me like they were seeing me for the first time. Which, in a way, they were. The family disappointment had just become the family success story. But more importantly, I had finally found my voice, and my family had finally learned to listen.